It was the usual winter season. Rainy Halloween, gray and dreary Thanksgiving, light snow on Christmas, cold and snowy New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Finally, Valentine's Day was approaching, and Jane and I were going to have a night out. As Robert Burns' poem To a Mouse says, the best laid plans of mice and men often fail. On that particular day, we woke up to 2 inches of snow, and it looked like more was on the way. By 12, a full foot had already fallen, and everything was closed. Linda got to the kids before I did, so when I got home, I realized that our Valentine's Day date was now off. Linda, even though we can't go out, why don't you show me that new dress you were going to wear? Jim, you know you'll only see it when you ask me out. Ever since Linda was in middle school, she liked to sew. She liked to make her own clothes, and when Emma was born, she enjoyed sewing things for her. Anyway, she had a new dress, and I wanted to look at it, but there was no soap. So instead of work clothes, we changed into comfy sweatpants and headed out for a night out with the kids. They ended up canceling work for all but the most essential employees, so we ended up with a 3.5-day weekend. I tell you, I think I can recount every word of Frozen. We've watched it so many times. Emma, with Tommy in her arms, stood in front of us and said, "Mommy, Daddy, that was the best weekend ever." They both climbed into our laps and started hugging and kissing us. We hoped it would never end. On Sunday, they cleared the streets so they had to work again on Monday. The weather broke again and started to clear up, but I would have been glad to have February gone. Monday evening, as we were getting ready to check in, Linda's phone rang. She looked at the display and said she had to answer it. She got up and walked across the room, with her expression turning into a wide smile. Hanging up the phone, she walked over and said, "That was Dee, and she said that since this month has been so dreary and there is an extra day in February this year, we should celebrate the end of it by going out and wishing him well. The 29th is a Friday. We could get a room at the Madison, eat at their restaurant, and then go down the street to this club that one of the guys Dave works with says is a very popular place. They have a band playing on Fridays, and if we stay at the Madison, there is no cover charge. Wouldn't that be a great way to say goodbye to this month?" Phil and Jane have assigned Mrs. Porter to watch their 2 children, and she said she'd be happy to watch ours too. We can pick them up on Sunday on our way to Mom and Dad's, so we'll have 2 nights of play, one in Madison and one at home. I wanted to hold back and make her sweat a little to see if I could have more fun, but looking at her pouty lips and pleading eyes, I relented. "You know I'm willing to do almost anything for you, baby. Of course we can go." With less than 2 weeks left to plan, we had to do everything at a fast pace. We booked the room, Dee took care of the restaurant and club reservations. Linda's excitement made me cringe. I would never turn down an opportunity to be with my beautiful wife. On Friday, February 29th, we both got off early and headed home to get ready. We loaded the kids' bags and sleeping bags into the car, along with bags for our clothes and the bag we had packed for the trip home on Saturday. We stopped by Mrs. Porter's and dropped the kids off and then drove to Madison. We met everyone at 6 p.m. in the lobby. Dee had dinner reservations for 6:30. My dark blue suit matched her dress well. We looked at the time and headed for the lobby. When the elevator doors opened, she pushed me out and said she forgot something in her room and would be right down. I moved to where the others were standing, and we waited for her. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out like she owned the place. All eyes in the lobby were on her, but her eyes were only on me. I had no idea she was so vain. We were seated at a table and decided we would just eat a light dinner. We could always order something from the club. Conversations at the table were light, and there was a lot of laughter. When dinner was done, we put on our coats and started the 1-block walk to the club. Dee had made a reservation for 8 o'clock at night. This was a good thing as the club was filling up fast. We sat down at a table and ordered a drink each. The fun was what we had hoped for. Linda and I aren't very good dancers, but we could hold our own. We did a couple of fast dances and a couple of slow dances, my favorite. When she swayed, her dress flowed and made her look even more seductive. On the way out, we ordered a couple plates of wings to snack on so the drinks wouldn't have time to bore us. I placed my order before the last dance, and it was delivered just in time for our return. I was feeding Linda when one of our group called out, "Come into the room." They all had a good laugh about it. Dave got up, walked over to Linda, and asked her to dance. We often danced with other members of the group at parties. "Sorry, Dave, but all my dances tonight are reserved for Jim." "Damn lucky guy tonight." "And oh, how lucky he'll be," she replied. There were cheers of approval again. Then we heard outrage at another table. Everyone looked over, and Jane asked, "Isn't that Mark Lavaliere in there?" Everyone agreed that it was, but Linda and I didn't care. Mark Lavaliere was a midfielder on our town's professional football team. Unlike most players, he preferred to live here year-round rather than somewhere else in the country. That and his charity work made him an even bigger legend in the neighborhood. I looked into Linda's eyes and asked, "Are you ready to go to our room yet?" "You just bought a plate of wings. We should eat them, because we're going to need the energy for tonight." Suddenly, Di said, "Look, he's heading this way." Everything went quiet, and from behind Linda we heard, "I'm Mark Lavaliere. Would you like to dance?" Linda let go of my hand, turned to look at him, and just held out her hand. As she got up to leave, Dave said, "I thought you said all your dancing was just for Jim. Now I'm really jealous." This elicited another round of laughter from everyone but me. She followed him onto the dance floor as if she was in some sort of trance. They did their dance, and just when I thought she was going to get back up, she stayed on the floor. I started to get up, but Jane caught my arm and said, "It's only a dance, Jim. Let her do it once." I backed up, but that one time was the third, then the fourth. The band leader, who looked like he was taking Lavaliere's example, started a slow song. Linda pressed her whole body against him as if he owned her. When the second slow song started, I stood up again, but this time Dee grabbed my hand and pulled me tight against him. "It's just one night, Jim. Leave it at that," she said. Her words confused me. I thought she was talking about the dance. Lavaliere lowered his face to Linda's face and whispered something to her. She looked up and nodded. Lavaliere looked at the band leader, nodded, and when the song ended, Linda went back to the table. When she returned, I whispered in her ear, "Maybe it's time to move the next dance to our room?" She didn't answer. She started to sit down when Dee announced, "Excuse me, everyone. I need to use the restroom. Linda, come with me, will you?" "Sorry, Jim. I could use a freshen up too." She got up and left without answering my question. Of course, the conversation immediately turned to why no woman walking with the group could go to the bathroom by herself. I was just beginning to wonder why my girlfriends were trying so hard to keep the conversation on that topic when Dee returned, alone. "Dee, where's Linda? Is she okay?" "Relax, Jim," Dee said, smiling. "She's fine. She just has some things to do. Our friends started teasing me." "You don't need to worry about her. She's a grown woman." I waited for about 10 minutes, and when she still didn't come back, I got up, grabbed an empty plate from under the wings, and headed for the bar. I approached one of the female bartenders. "Excuse me, but my wife went to the restroom about 15 minutes ago and still hasn't come out. She never stays that long. Could you please leave or send someone to make sure she's okay?" The bartender looked at me like I had a third eye as I lowered my gaze to my empty plate and said, "The wings are great, and she likes spicy food, but she does have that reaction from time to time." "Really? I just want to know she's okay. She's 5 feet 3 inches tall and has brown hair." A voice came from behind me. "She's fine. You don't need to check on her." It was Dee. Looking at the bartender, she said, "It's okay. I'll take care of it." I wondered why the bartender looked like she sympathized with me, turned and walked back to the bar. "Where is she, Dee? She went to the restroom with you, and now I don't know where she is." "Let's go to the end of the bar. We can get some privacy there." She dragged me downstairs where we were alone. She looked me in the eye and said, "Jim, Linda loves you. She loves you and the kids more than anything in the world, and she always will, and you know it. but she's going to spend tonight with Mark. So on what was supposed to be a special night for us, she left me for some asshole jock. I looked at Dee, growling those words. Jim, she didn't dump you. She's coming home to you tomorrow, and you'll have many more special nights together. And she didn't even have the guts to tell me to my face that she was leaving me. She just slipped out the back door. Jim, listen to me. She didn't leave you. Well, if she didn't leave me, then where the hell is she? She's certainly not with me now, is she? I spoke louder and louder, and I didn't care who heard me. Please calm down. People are looking at you. Look, I know this is hurting you, but it's just today. Linda knows. We all know you're the only man for her, and you always will be. You're a good guy. I couldn't take any more of her condescending ramblings. I turned and headed back to the table. As I approached, everyone fell silent. Dee sat down and I remained standing. As I looked around the table, all the worms were squirming. A little too loudly, I said, when our little group first started getting together, we all talked about the sanctity of marriage. Until the last one, you and Linda all agreed that infidelity was once and for all. I wasn't leading the discussion. I didn't feel it was necessary to discuss it. Tonight, you have all become conspirators in Linda's once-and-done attitude. Dave said, but Jim, that's Mark Lavaliere. Dave, how would you feel if you had a man in Dee's shoes who just left without even saying goodbye? How would you feel if you had to go home and tell your kids that their parents were getting a divorce? Oh wait, that's right. You don't have young children who might feel the consequences. Dee said, Jim, calm down. Linda will come home tomorrow and everything will be just fine. Dee, you open your slutty mouth again, and I will sink my teeth into your throat. Okay, Jim, you can't talk to my wife like that. Then run down there and get my wife and give him yours. Everyone sat in stunned silence. They had never seen me like this before. As soon as I leave this table, you are all dead to me. Don't ever try to talk to me if you see me on the street. Turn and run the other way. You won't like the result if you don't. I pulled a 20 out of my wallet and tossed it on the table. That's enough for me, and you'll all pay for the whore. I grabbed my coat and saw that Linda still had it on over what had been her chair, and with a sigh I said, screw it, and left. It was a lonely walk back to the hotel. Would I find them there, or just an empty room? When I reached the door, I saw that it was dark inside, so I opened it and walked in. Her underwear was on the bed. It must be what she had come back to spread out. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 10:30 and my world had ended. I picked them up and tossed them in the trash, changed into my suit, gathered our other clothes, and headed for the door. Upon reaching the lobby, I went to check us in. The clerk looked concerned, and I assured her that something was wrong and that the room was perfect. She smiled again and wished me a good night. I called Mrs. Porter and told her something was wrong and I would pick up the kids. She was worried, but I assured her that everything was fine. They were already asleep, so I carried them one by one and locked them in their car seats. When we got home, I carried them to their bedrooms and they didn't even realize they were home. Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, the kids got up and started looking for us. They found me on the couch in the living room. Daddy, why are you here? Mom and I had a little fight, so I ended up here. We'll just go tell Mom to be nicer to you. Before I could say anything, they were up the stairs and down the hall to the master bedroom. A few minutes later, they were back in the living room. Daddy, Mommy's not in there. Well, I'm sure she'll show up sooner or later. I led them into the house and made them breakfast. When they were done, they came crawling back to me, one on each side. While they ate, I knew what was coming next, so I had already loaded Frozen into the VCR. I looked at the clock and saw that it was nearing 1 o'clock when we heard a car pull up to the driveway. Before I could catch it, Emma was at the window, sticking her head through the curtains and looking outside. Her head was down, and she looked like she had just lost her best friend. The front door swung open, and Linda walked in her blue dress. Jim, I'm home. She sounded like she always did when she came home on business. She closed the front door and turned on the light. Emma stood in front of her with her hands on her hips. Linda suddenly thought she saw a ghost. Mom, where have you been? And why were you kissing that man? Linda stood as if dumbfounded. She looked up and saw me and Tommy, but no words came off her lips. Well, Mommy, answer me. Finally, she found her voice and shouted, Emma, take your brother and go to your rooms. I'll talk to you later. Both children were shocked and scared and ran up the stairs to their rooms. She looked at me and asked, Why are they here? Well, Linda, they live here. When did you bring them home? Last night I didn't want to be alone. Why didn't you stay at the Madison? Good question. Maybe because for one split second, my world stopped. I decided that if I was going to die, I'd rather be here with my kids than in some hotel by myself. And why did you decide you were going to die? Because the man I loved and thought I'd spend the rest of my life with threw it all away for some cheap goddamn thrills. Did you and Zazrans have a good laugh at the cuckold you left behind? Dad, what are you talking about? I didn't leave you, and I'm here now. Where did you spend the night last night? At Mark's house. And where were you supposed to be? Well, I was supposed to be with you, but Jim, I had a once-in-a-lifetime chance and I couldn't pass it up. Well, then call him and ask him to come get you, because your once-in-a-lifetime chance cost you what you thought was yours forever. I'm going to see a lawyer on Monday. I'm asking for custody of the kids. I don't think I can leave them with you. Jim, get a grip. We're not getting a divorce and you're not taking my kids. I dumped your shit on the bed, packed up all my stuff, and moved it to the computer lab. I need to leave and go to the store. I need to get a few things. I stood up and walked past her, heading towards the garage. She tried to call out to me, but I didn't listen. I drove to the Walmart superstore across town and bought a twin bed frame, a Cool Gel mattress, a twin bed in a bag, 2 pillows, 6 plastic containers, and a locking door handle. $400 later, I returned to the garage and began setting up my new living space. Jim, where are my clothes that I took to Madison? I threw them in the trash can in my room. I don't need any more reminders of your deception. As I hauled the stuff into the home office, Linda asked what I was doing. It was pretty stupid after her antics the night before. After getting everything into the room, I started putting it all together. First, the bed frame, then the mattress, while I changed the lock. As I put the clothes in the drawers and made the bed, I noticed that it was already 5:30. I walked out, closed the door, locked it, and went looking for the kids. They were in Emma's room, huddled together on her bed. Hey, have you guys eaten yet? They both shook their heads no, and I asked, Where would you like to go? We had a running joke in our house since Linda and I first met. On our first date, we went to Wendy's, so both kids yelled, To Wendy's! Get your boots and jackets on and let's go. They were ready in a flash. I decided to take them into the house to eat. As we finished and got ready to leave, Emma asked, Are you going to bring Mommy anything? Not this time, Princess. She can make herself something if she gets hungry. We quickly got back in the car and were home. Linda wasn't in the living room, so I asked the wrong question. So what do you two want to do? In unison, they replied, Watch Frozen. Okay, let's get your tub sorted out and then we'll get Frozen. They were in the tub in no time. I helped them wash their hair, then dried them and tucked them into their pajamas. Wrapped up in a blanket, we started the movie. Both kids passed out after about 3/4 of the movie. I waited until the movie was over to put them down. Linda didn't come out of the bedroom. I walked around the house and made sure everything was locked. I retired to my new room and went to check my email and Facebook page. Everything was as usual in email, and there was a private message on Facebook asking me to check out Jane Freeman's Facebook page. Jane spoke enthusiastically about Friday night. To her credit, she didn't mention any names, but that didn't mean others reading her stories didn't want to put in their 2 cents. One woman I didn't know commented by calling all the names. Insults followed. I was called a faggot, and a loser. Things didn't go so well with Linda. I can't say I disagreed with those names now, but it still hurt me to hear her call them. I stopped and thought about what my future would be like. Even if I got rid of this bitch, I would still be called a faggot. I decided to write my own post to ease the pain a little. And so I typed and corrected until I got it right. Hello, Facebook fans. Friday night, my wife decided she wanted to put me in my place. We went with a few friends to a party that was supposed to be a goodbye February, we won't miss you party. We had everything set up to spend Friday night at a top establishment. We had a wonderful light dinner at their restaurant and then headed to a club nearby. We had drinks and ordered wings. We danced, looked into each other's eyes, and spoke little words of love into them. It couldn't have been a better night. Then some asshole came in and interrupted our little party. You probably know him. He's a hometown hero and all. Mark Lavaliere waltzed over to our table, stood right behind my wife, and said, I'm Mark Lavaliere, if you'd like to dance. He didn't ask me if she could dance. No, this asshole headed straight for my wife. She didn't even look at me, just got up and went with him. They danced 4 fast songs, and then the band leader started a slow one. I tried to get up and intervene, but was stopped by one of the other women in our party. They started the second slow song, and he leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She looked him in the eye and nodded in agreement. When the song ended, she went back to the table and the asshole disappeared. I asked her if she was ready to leave so we could finish our date, and she threw me a strange look. She never answered. A friend, or so I thought she was a friend, announced that she needed to use the restroom and asked my wife to go with her. She left and did not return. I waited for a while and then went to ask the staff if they could go check on her. A voice I knew all too well came from behind me and said there was no need. She was in good hands. She informed me that my wife, the mother of our 2 children, would not be home that evening. She had a better offer. At the table, all my so-called friends were telling me how lucky I was that Mark Lavaliere had chosen my wife over all the other women at the club. I didn't feel lucky. I left the club telling my now ex-friends that they were as dead to me as my soon-to-be ex-wife. If you are reading this, it means I am now a scoundrel and a loser. It will take me a while to regain my confidence and get my man card back, but I will. As for the wife, if she wants entertainment so badly, she'll soon be able to get as much as she wants. I cut and pasted this to my Facebook page, shut down the computer, and crawled into my new bed. Waking up Sunday morning, the kids and I begged not to go to church. I'd still have time to run into these people. Instead, I took the kids to McDonald's for breakfast. There was a play area there, and I let them play to their heart's content. We got home at 2 o'clock, and I started getting them ready for lunch at Grandma and Grandpa's, just like any other Sunday. Linda came flying out of the bedroom, complaining why I hadn't woken her up earlier, since now we'd be late. Dad, do you really think your mom cares that we're going to be late? It doesn't matter. Why should she delay dinner just for us? The ride to her parents' house went smoothly. The kids didn't even squeak. When we pulled up to the door, she checked one more time to make sure we were okay, and then knocked. Her mom opened the door with a shocked look on her face. Are you okay, Mom? Is Dad okay? We didn't think you were coming today. Aren't you supposed to be with your boyfriend? Mom, I'm a married woman. I don't have a boyfriend. That's not what we heard. Who told you that? My friend Betty told me. She read it on Facebook. She said, who started this nonsense? She read it on Jane Freeman's Facebook page. We still didn't believe it, so we read it ourselves. We went to your page, but there was nothing there. I haven't gotten on the computer yet today. Well, then we went to Jim's page and read his story, so we figured you wouldn't show up there since he was a basketball player? Linda looked like a fish out of water and couldn't speak. Actually, Mom, he's a football player, but still an asshole, I said. Are you really planning on divorcing her? I only nodded, at which point Emma called out from left field. And yesterday afternoon she kissed him in the driveway. Linda almost fainted. Finally, she said, Mom, we're going home. I think we need to talk. We turned and walked to the car. On the way, she turned around and asked Emma, Why did you say that? You always told me not to lie, Mommy. You lied and it was wrong. Linda turned away and didn't say anything else during the trip. When we got home, she jumped out of the car and left me to watch the kids. Emma was whimpering and I told her that she hadn't done anything wrong. When we got into the house, Linda was nowhere to be seen. I suggested we watch a movie with them, and that calmed them down. I fed them, bathed them, and sat down to watch Frozen again. When it was over, I put them to bed. I headed to my room, and then Linda came out of her room and asked if we could talk. I had ignored her until now. And what would you like to talk about? Why don't we sit in the living room and talk? Sure, why not? It doesn't make any difference where we do it. We walked in. I sat down on the couch. She sat next to me. I stood up and moved to a chair. Jim, I'm the same as yesterday. Why are you acting like this? Tell me, Linda, if you're the same as yesterday, then you're a lying whore who had no trouble making a fool of her husband in front of the whole town. Is this the same man you're talking about? Okay, I misspoke. It was supposed to be Friday. Oh, the one who said she loved me and then left without a word to have fun with some asshole. That whore. Look, Jim, stop name-calling and making something beautiful look bad. Beautiful means leaving me standing at the table waiting for you to come back from the bathroom with your snake girlfriend who didn't think anything wrong with helping you sneak out the back door with that asshole? Jim, check your ego. It wasn't as bad as you say. Yes, I left with Mark, and he made love to me, but I'm home now and we need to move on. One last question. Why did you bother coming home then? She looked at me like I had two heads. I came home because I love you. And because I love you, that's why I'm divorcing you. We discussed it many times, just you and me and with the group. We all stated that if there was infidelity, it was one and done. You've exercised your right and I've had enough. That's not fair, Jim. I wouldn't do that to you if you had the chance. That's the thing. You did what you did, and I wouldn't have done it to you. We'll never know if I do the same thing to you now. You just endure it to prove a point, no matter how bad you felt. You'll never know what it feels like to have an entire room full of strangers watching some lady ask me to dance, keep me on the dance floor for half an hour, and then escort me out the back door while you sit there waiting to finish what was supposed to be our special night. You'll never know what it's like to sit with two small children and wait for me to come home the next day. You'll never know that no matter how hard you tried to keep the kids out the window when I came home, one still got in there and saw me making out with some stranger in our driveway where all the neighbors could see too. I suppose you'll say you looked around before you did it, but that would mean you knew you were doing the wrong thing. If Emma saw you, who's to say someone else didn't see you too? From the sound of the motor and the way it took off, I'm sure it caught the attention of at least one of our neighbors. You see, Linda, they might pat you on the back and all I'll get is a giggle behind my back. That's why, Linda, I'm going to seek a divorce. I'll ask for custody of the kids, since there's no margin for error in this state. I'll agree to free visitation, but you won't be allowed to keep them overnight if I find one of your future lovers in the house. Why didn't you give me a chance to wrestle for you on Friday? I didn't want you to make a scene, get the shit beaten out of you, and I still left with him. And who are you to say I'm going to get the shit beaten out of me? Come on, Jim, look at you and him. He's like twice your size. Sit here. I want you to see something. I got up and went to my room and came back with 2 pieces of paper and held them out to her. What is this supposed to be? Read the top of the first page. Okay, so it's Mark's stats, fine. Look at the second page. Okay, there's your stats from the gym, big deal. How much can he squeeze? Let's see, it says 250 pounds. What does mine say? 245 pounds. So you think that just because this asshole can bench press 5 pounds more than me, he's going to beat me in a fair fight? Yeah, he might be a few inches taller than me, but that doesn't mean a damn thing. Look, Linda, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You decided to make a fool of me. Your friend decided to make me a laughing stock for the world by bragging about it on Facebook. Now you can have whatever you want and do whatever you want anytime you want, just not here. Jim, I want to spend the rest of my life with you and the kids. You should have thought about that on Friday night. Look, I saw your face when I asked you to go with me. You had already made the decision to go with him. The question is, Linda, have you thought about the kids? She sighed suddenly, and that told me everything. You haven't even once thought about the kids. God forbid if something happened to them, how would anyone get through to you? What would you do if none of us were around when you finally got home yesterday? The problem is, Linda, like all whores, you were thinking with your cunt and not your head. Well, you've lived out your fantasy. Now get ready to relive your nightmare. I stood up and headed back to my room, but before I went in there, I turned around and said, if you plan on staying in this house with us, you need to go and get tested for STDs and such. HIV can take 6 months before it shows itself in all its glory. Don't be silly, Jim. Mark is a professional football player. I'm sure they get tested all the time. In case you haven't noticed, his season ended on December 29th. That was over 3 months ago, and you still think he's being tested regularly? Besides, they only test them for PEDs, which are performance-enhancing drugs. I went to my room, closed, and locked the door. I opened my Facebook page and I had 50 new friend requests, mostly female. At this point, I had nothing to lose, so I added them all as friends. I looked at the responses to my post, and they varied. I needed a plan of action going forward, so I spent the next 2 hours writing down the pros and cons of my new life. Linda and I had an active life, but now my priority had to be Emma and Tommy. Would I be able to give up fun for them? Only time would tell. I was making enough money, so we could get by without Linda's income. It would be difficult, but we'd manage. If I didn't have kids, I don't know what I'd do. I got up early. The bed wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Buying a thicker mattress made a big difference. We usually lifted the kids together, but if we divorced and I was alone, I'd have to get used to doing everything myself. I lifted and packed up both kids, Emma to school and Tommy to kindergarten. They both stayed at school after school was over until one of us picked them up. They had lots of activities to do. After eating breakfast, I loaded them into the car and hit the road without ever seeing Linda. When I got to work, the taunts and jokes started. There was a football ball and a pack of condoms on my desk. I decided I needed to nip this in the bud, so I took the condoms and taped them to a piece of paper. Underneath them, I wrote, "They didn't use any," went out and pinned that to the bulletin board. I kept the football ball just to annoy the person who spent all the money on it. When I left the office for my break, the condoms were gone and no one made eye contact with me. I went to my boss's office and asked if I could talk to her. "What can I do for you, Jim?" "Ruth, I was wondering if I could take the next 2 weeks off. I'll be finished this week, but I have a lot to get done." "Is it that bad?" I guess I should have been there to see how it really was, but the creep just walked up, ignoring everyone at the table except Linda, and when he asked her to dance, she dropped my hand without hesitation and took it. To me, she said nothing. It was like I didn't exist. When she returned to the table, I asked her to leave with me, but she ran off to the restroom with one of the other ladies at the table. That was the last time I saw her until she came into the house on Saturday afternoon. Emma, our oldest, ran over to the window and watched her mother chatting with some jerk in our driveway. She has no remorse for doing this, and I don't want to live in the shadow of her one-night stand entertainment. Hopefully, by then, we'll have started the divorce and have some semblance of order. Jim, we've been discussing the idea of remote work for some of the staff. Basically, you'd be doing all the same things you do here, just from home. You could take the kids to school and be there for them when it's over. You'd have to come in once a week for a few hours, but then they'd still be in school. In the summer, we can think of something else. Do you think you'd be interested in something like that? Ruth, you're a catch. If you weren't married, I'd marry you in a heartbeat. Jim, you flatter me, but I think the 20 years I have over you, and the fact that Bill won't go for it might cause trouble. You've got your hands full, so why don't you take the day off and do what you need to do, and come back tomorrow, and we'll get your new laptop ready for you. Thanks, Ruth. You'll never know how grateful I am. I won't let you down. I went back to my office, closed everything up and left. When I got home, Linda's car was there, but she was gone. I went to my room and turned on my computer to start searching for information about divorce. I did a lot of research and found that I didn't even need a lawyer if everything was to be divided equally. Child custody will be determined by a judge, but that won't be until closer to the end. We may have to go to counseling, but that's not a problem. I felt I was on a higher moral ground, and the job change would allow me to be a full-time caregiver. Everything I read said not to move out of the house because it can come back to haunt you later. I started online, and then it was up to me. The next major issue was money. I went to the bank, withdrew a third from the account, and opened a new one, in my name only. Since Linda wasn't there, I couldn't open an account in her name only, but I could open a second one in both our names. After all 3 accounts were opened, I withdrew my name from the first one. When I got home, her car was still parked in the garage, but I didn't see it anywhere. I still had things to do, so I wasn't paying attention to where or what she might be doing. I noticed the time and went out to my truck to pick up the kids. As the garage door started to open, I saw a flashy sports car pull into the driveway. Linda saw my face, and I realized she had said, "Oh no." You never know how angry you can get until the snake decides to bite a second time. Linda started to come out just as I reached the end of the garage, and neither of them saw me pick up 2 hammers. The first flew straight into his windshield. With the second, I knocked out his headlights and headed for the driver's door. The fiberglass sides didn't hold up very well as I made my way down to the door. Linda had not yet gotten out of the car before he put it in reverse to pull out of the driveway. The door slammed into her, knocking her to the ground, and he nearly ran her over. Once on the street, he put it in gear to get out of the way, but not before a second hammer crashed into the back of the car. Finally, he managed to control himself and disappeared around the corner. I looked at Linda lying on the ground and realized her leg was broken. I went out and picked up my hammer, went back and picked up the other one and put them away. I went out and picked her up and put her in my truck. As I was taking her to the hospital, I called her mom and asked if she could pick up the kids. "What's wrong, Jim?" "Well, Mom," I told her the story. "Apparently she has a broken leg and who knows what else. If you and Dad can take the kids, I'll get them as soon as I can." "Do you want us to come to the hospital?" "Not yet. If she has to be left behind, I'll call and let you know. If the police show up, who knows? I love you guys, no matter what happens." "We love you too, Jim." At the hospital, Linda was still in shock, so the only one who could say anything was me. They looked at me suspiciously as if I had done it, so I threw caution to the wind and told them how it was. They saw it as a crime anyway and wanted to report it to the police. After they took my statement, they couldn't decide what to do. The asshole wasn't around to press charges against me, and if they did, the big hero would be in trouble for the hit and run, so they left it at that for now. I gave the hospital my insurance card, and for all practical purposes, it was filed as a home accident. They wanted to keep her overnight in case of concussion and threw me a nasty look when I told them they could keep her permanently. I drove to her parents' house and picked up my kids. I told them what room she was in, and then took the kids to McDonald's for dinner. After putting the kids to bed, I went back to Facebook to write about my journey into loneliness. I wrote, "If the big football hero wasn't happy enough, today he decided to dip his wick again. I really don't know how much more I can take before I lose my mind. Some will say I threatened him, but all I said was that I couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't a threat. It was just a statement. Looks like I'm going to have to take the war to his turf or he'll never learn." On Tuesday, I got the kids up, and when they asked when Mom was coming home, I said I didn't know exactly, but probably soon. When I called to see how she was doing, I was told she wouldn't be able to come out until Wednesday around noon. When I got home with the kids, her parents were waiting for us. I invited them in, and the kids went to their rooms to change. "Jim, she doesn't look good. What are you going to do?" "Mom, my boss changed my work status. Starting in 3 weeks, I'll be working remotely. The next 2, I'm on vacation. I've looked into the divorce laws in our state, and I think I can get custody of the kids if I give her liberal visitation rights." I've moved all my stuff into the home office, and she can stay there as long as she wants. But we'll both have our own rules. If she breaks any rule, she'll be out the door, and her antics of yesterday will no longer be tolerated. I've divided all our money into 3 installments. She'll have her own, and she'll have to contribute to the house fund while she lives here. I can't think of anything else. I'm fair to her, much more than I should be. We agree, son. For that matter, she said they didn't do anything yesterday. If you want to believe her, that's fine, but know that I got home at 10:30 yesterday morning. I sat at the computer until about noon, then I went to the bank and came home. It was about 3 o'clock when I went out to get in the car to go pick up the kids. I know you're smart enough to realize that 4.5 hours is more than enough time to do all the dirty work. Do you want me to show you the stains on her underwear as proof? I brought them home from the hospital yesterday. She was only coming home to pick up the kids. She didn't expect me to be here. Do I need to say anything else? No, son. You've laid out your case well. Take care of yourself. And they left, and I fed the kids dinner and got ready for the long drive. When I stopped by on Tuesday, Ruth was at her best. She had a Surface Book 3 with a 15-inch touchscreen. It came with an optional 24-inch monitor. I could work from anywhere in my house. I thanked her again. On Wednesday, I picked up a set of clothes for Linda to wear at home, took them to her room, and then went back downstairs to check her out. I was still surprised the cops didn't come back for me. When they drove her out to the curb, we never said anything to each other. I drove her home, climbed the stairs, and put her in her bed. It would have been better if she'd used my room downstairs, but screw her. I'll be there soon with your lunch. If you need to go to the bathroom, here's the bedding I brought you and wet wipes. They said you have bruised ribs in addition to a broken leg. I charged your cell phone. It's on the nightstand. I need to get back to work. Jim, we need to talk. No, Linda, we don't. Any conversation had to take place before Friday night. There's nothing you can say now to change my mind. Jim, nothing happened on Monday. Just like nothing happened Friday night? Look, Jim, it was just a mistake. He called and said he wanted to talk about Friday. Things got out of hand and it won't happen again. You haven't realized yet that I don't care anymore. You said Friday was once and for all, and now it's Monday. What's going to happen next time? Then why did you react that way? You just don't understand. First, you disrespected me on Friday night. Then you disrespected your family by letting that chicken shit bring you home and kiss you in front of your daughter and everyone else. And on Monday, you went out with him again, even though you could have just told him no on the phone. Now, if he had said jump, you would have. The funny thing is, instead of defending you, he ran like a cowardly asshole. He did it. How long do you think you would have been lying in the road if I hadn't taken you to the hospital? Linda, I don't have the strength for you anymore. I'm going to get you back to your new normal, but if you plan on staying here, you're going to have to keep paying your share. If you don't want to pay, then we can move you to your parents or anywhere else you want to go. I went downstairs and made her some soup, a sandwich, and a glass of tea. I took them to her, sat her down, and opened the curtains to let some light into the room. Linda, I have to tell you that while you were there, I had an STD test done for you. The results will be mailed here in a little over a week. Until we get the results, I'd like you not to kiss the kids. I'll tell the kids it's because of your ribs. I turned and started to walk away. I could hear her sobs as I closed the door. As I left, I knew that Mr. Mark Lavaliere was going to have to pay one way or another. When I went in to get the kids, I told them that Mom was home, but they should refrain from jumping on her until her ribs were healed. When I got home, I took them to her and saw that she had used the bedding. So while they were talking, I cleaned everything up. I took the tray of food into the kitchen and got her some fresh tea and a bottle of water. I told the kids to come get me when they were ready for a snack and left the room. Back in my room, I opened my Facebook page. There was a private message from a guy I had added as a friend just the other day. He did the same to me. If you are planning to do something, can I help? I replied, I'll keep you in mind. As I sat there, I went over in my mind everything that had happened. The main thing I noticed was how easily the bandleader had set up this asshole to pull off his little seduction. Was Chez Pierre his hunting ground? If so, how often did he use it? I sent another question to my new friend on Facebook. If you don't mind me asking, can I ask what he did to you? I didn't specify exactly what I wanted to know, in case it was just someone looking for something to feel part of the group. He answered quicker than I thought he would. I was out with my wife and a couple friends. It was a Friday night after New Year's Eve. My wife is good looking, but not stunning. However, she was one of the best that night. She went dancing with him and did not return to the table. He left her at our house Saturday afternoon. As they left the club, the rest of our group was telling me how lucky I was that he chose my wife. Life at home hasn't been good since. I sent a reply. May I ask where it happened? At Chez Pierre, he replied. I wrote back, I'll contact you if I think of anything. So it seemed like a pattern and a hunting ground. I decided to check it out again this Friday. I looked at the clock and realized it was time to get to dinner. I went back upstairs and found both kids lying on either side of her sleeping soundly. It hurt me so much to think about what she had done to our family. The rest of the week was just a repeat of the previous day. Thursday afternoon, I bathed Linda with a sponge bath, but avoided her intimate areas. I'm sure she felt that, given my concern for her, I could forgive her as well. But it was very doubtful. Friday night, I put the kids to bed, went to my room, changed into one of my suits, and went to Chez Pierre. I paid the entrance fee and went inside. I spotted the time. It was 9:30. He was sitting at the same table as the last time I was here and acted like he owned the place. The band came out to play again, and he got up, crossed the room under the gaze of everyone there, walked over to a pretty lady, and did the same thing he did that night. He led her to the dance floor, and it was as if everyone else gave way for him to be alone. I watched the band leader, and just as I suspected when the asshole nodded his head, the next two songs were slow. A whisper in her ear, a nod to the band leader, and when it was over, she left the dance floor. From where I was sitting, I could see them both. He grabbed his coat and headed out the back door. She grabbed her purse and headed for the restroom, never to return. I got up, threw a 20 on the counter, and left. The weekend went well for me and the kids. We watched a lot of, and yes, you guessed it, Frozen. I checked on Linda about every 4 hours, never saying more than necessary. Every once in a while I'd hear her phone ringing, but that didn't bother me anymore. That is until Sunday afternoon when Dee knocked on the door. What do you want, bitch? Jim, that's no way to talk to a friend. I'm here to see Linda. Well, slut, we have two problems. One, I told you I don't want to see you again, or I might hurt you. Two, Linda still can't move and I won't let you in. Now run back under the rock you crawled out from under before I kick you off my property. Jim, sooner or later you're going to have to forgive us before this hatred consumes you. You know, cunt. I never had this problem until you decided to sink my marriage. Now get off my property. And I slammed the door in her face. I went up to Linda's room and said, I don't care if you want to remain friends with those traitorous bastards, but if you invite them over to your place again, it's only so they can help you move. Otherwise, I'm separating one of their heads from their body, and I don't care which one. Linda looked at me and said, But Jim, I'm lonely. I need another adult to talk to. Then call your mom and dad and have them come over and move you in with them. If they want to let those bastards in, that's their choice. Jim, why are you acting like this? Linda, have you ever wondered what the statue of Lady Justice represents? Honestly, no. You should have. Maybe then you would have realized. Why don't you just tell me, Mr. High and Mighty? Sure, be considerate. First, a blindfold is placed over her face to symbolize that by law, everyone is treated equally, regardless of your status. Next, we will go down to the foot of the statue. There you will find a snake under a book lying beneath her foot, signifying that justice will be served over evil, as stated in the Constitution upon which she stands. Next is the sword in her left hand, representing punishment, which by law can be swift and final. The last stop is the scales of evidence. The evidence must be weighed and balanced on its merits. Linda, you and the jerk have tipped the scales. Until they are balanced, We can't proceed. Before you say anything, yes, I could go out and entertain some whore to get even, but that won't work. You need to experience the same pain I did to make it happen. But you don't regret what happened, even after he put you in the hospital. It was your fault, Jim. If you hadn't threatened him with the hammer, it never would have happened. Linda, this whole mess is both your and his fault. Get over it. I've already prepared the divorce papers, and then you can go and do whatever you want, just not with the kids. If you want to keep this bunch of cheap friends, fine. Just don't ever show up here. The day will come when you realize what you've done, but you'll realize it too late. Tell your friends to never come to my house again. On Wednesday, when she had been home for a week, a letter came from the hospital. She had been diagnosed with gonorrhea. When I handed her the letter, she almost fainted. I called the doctor to find out what she would have to do for treatment. She would have to take a single dose of 250 milligrams ceftriaxone intramuscularly and 1 g of azithromycin orally. They said that because of my broken leg, I could pick them up at the pharmacy at the hospital. I loved all the points this asshole made. On Facebook, I messaged my new friend that they should go and get tested, and he sent a thank you in return. Now I was more determined than ever to get even with this asshole. Friday night I was at the club again when he singled out a sheep from the flock. I got out, got in my pickup truck, and drove to the back of the club. There was a big caddy sitting next to the door. I turned down an alley and waited for him to come out. A woman who looked like Dee appeared, and he took off, with me right behind him. I stayed far enough behind and let a couple of cars between us so he wouldn't realize he was being followed. When he turned into the driveway to the top floor of the house, I just kept going. I turned around, and once I was next to him, I wrote down the address. Once I reached the house, I went to the county registry and entered the numbers. The house belonged to some charitable organization, and when I looked it up, it was listed as the CEO. As befits a scumbag, he ran everything through the charity so that if anything happened, his money wouldn't be touched. The weekend passed without any negative events, and on Monday, after picking up the kids, I drove to the jerk's house again. I parked on the street a few houses down where other cars were parked and walked back. Just in case, I walked up to the front door to see what kind of security he had. Why is it that people with wealth living in upscale neighborhoods don't feel the need for security? I knocked, but no one came up. I walked around the back of the house and checked it out. I calculated how far it was from the back door with the sliding glass to the front door. I found where his electrical box was and then went back to my truck and drove home. As I was driving home, I passed a COOP store. A sudden idea hit my brain. I pulled into the store and went to the department that sold parts for electric fencing. When all was said and done, I spent $600. I bought everything I needed to wire the entry and sliding glass door from the street, then stopped by Harbor Freight for a bullhorn and a super bright flashlight, and I was all set. Now everything depended on Friday night. As the week progressed, Linda seemed to become more and more depressed. Such is the price you have to pay when you want to play. I didn't stop caring for her, just stayed out of the house to talk to her, answered her questions when she asked, or asked her what she wanted to eat. I called her boss the Tuesday after the accident. I soaped up the reason, and told her when I brought her home. She had 6 weeks of sick leave, but she was going to take 8. She would have to take them as unpaid or as vacation, but they would at least keep her job for that length of time. Finally, Friday came. When I left the house around 9, all my stuff was already in the back seat of my truck. I didn't have to go inside this time, I just waited in the back seat. Sitting there, I thought back on the last few Fridays. Lavaliere seemed to go on strike at about the same time, with the band coming back at 10. The dance would last about half an hour, and then they would leave, so predictably. Like clockwork, he left at 10:30, and she left right after. It was hard to see her in the dark at that distance, but she seemed familiar. A 20-minute drive to his house, parked in the driveway and walked in the front door. All too easy. As I sat in the car, the light came on in the front bedroom. Now I knew where he did his deeds. I changed into a black shirt and pants and pulled a balaclava over my head. The curtains were open, so anyone who came in could look in, which I did with my Nikon camera with night flash and high-speed film. I got a lot of shots of him and the lady. The lights were turned off at about 12:30, and I waited until about an hour before I could launch my attack. I covered the back of my truck with a tarp so the taillights wouldn't be visible when I backed into his driveway. The grass was soft, as I had hoped, and wet, making it easier to sink a piece of rebar. I rolled the 16-gauge wire up to the front door and cut it, then wrapped it around the doorknob. Back at the truck, I hooked it up to the Datamar's 2-joule generator. I ran a second wire to the tailgate and connected it. Taking the ground wires, I connected them to the armature and battery. I went back and turned on the main breaker, plunging the house into total darkness. Back at the truck, I grabbed a horn and a 100,000 lumen flashlight and stood 15 feet from the window. At exactly 2 o'clock, I turned the flashlight on, pointing it at the window, and said into the bullhorn, "Come out, you son of a bitch! Get my wife out here right now! I'm gonna beat the shit out of you so people can see that's really all you're made of." Yeah, that was bullshit. It wasn't my wife in there. It was the police chief's wife. They both woke up disoriented, and to get away from the light, they crept towards the exit. I could hear them hitting the walls as they couldn't turn on the lights because there was no electricity. One of them, I believe, bad word, Lavaliere, grabbed the handle of the front door and let out a scream after getting electrocuted. I heard another scream, probably from the back door, and then a loud tearing sound. I ran to the truck and threw the horn and flashlight into the bed. I disconnected the battery, pulled out the wire and armature and threw them in there as well. I grabbed the stun gun and headed to the tailgate to turn on the switch. When I got there, Lavaliere was lying on the grass holding his leg. I walked over to Lavaliere and said, "You really are a miserable asshole, aren't you?" After loading all my stuff into the truck, I headed back to the house, but not before calling 911 from a discarded phone, reporting a disturbance at the home of Marc Lavaliere, a local hero. Saturday morning, the news was all about the accident at Marc Lavaliere's home. Medics found him and his girlfriend in the backyard. The investigation revealed that for whatever reason, Mr. Lavaliere, instead of using a chair, threw his girlfriend through a glass door to get outside, injuring his leg in the process. Both were in the hospital at the time. Linda watched the news in horror. She had thought that maybe she had a future with this jerk, but now she realized that she didn't. Throughout the day, there were reports. A leg injury could end his career. And finally, Marc Lavaliere to be held for attempted murder. I got on Facebook and my new friend sent me a message that simply said, "Thank you." Linda, like the fool she had turned into, tried to kill herself because she was sure it was over now. Her main problem was that she forgot we were home too. I called 911 and they arrived in time to save her. She spent the next 5 weeks in a psychiatric unit. She lost her job, and when she was released, she moved back in with her mom and dad. There was no attachment alienation action in our state, so a local attorney decided to file a class action lawsuit against Marc Lavaliere and his charity for failing to properly treat someone's wife. Yes, I know, no such lawsuit exists until now. Over 200 husbands have joined it. No, I didn't join. I didn't need anyone to question me. When the case went to the judge, he awarded each side $100,000 plus attorney's fees. Marc Lavaliere's charitable foundation went bankrupt. All of his personal property had to be sold, leaving him with about $10,000 for all of his work. Since he could no longer play ball, in more than one sense of the word, he packed up what he had left and drove the Greyhound back to his hometown and his parents' basement. I waited until the last week of August to get even with the band director. It was Friday night, and the kids were visiting their grandparents and Linda. I was sitting at the entrance to Chez Pierre at 1 o'clock in the morning. The band came out, loaded their instruments into the van, and smoked together. When the smoke ran out, they dispersed to their cars. The band leader's car was parked across one from my truck. When he got close enough, I came out of the darkness and hit him with a stun gun. I caught him as he fell, dragged him behind the cars, and put a gag in his mouth. When he started to come to his senses, I told him, You shouldn't have made a deal with the devil. I took a baseball bat and destroyed both of his arms. He would never be able to play an instrument or conduct again. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, I drove in the opposite direction so he wouldn't see the truck. Later that evening, he was found and taken to the hospital, but they couldn't do anything about his hands. The cops asked him if he knew who did it, and all he could say was, "Someone who doesn't like the devil." I got custody of the children, so when the divorce was final, I only saw Linda when I dropped off or picked up the kids. My life outside the home was only on weekends. I wasn't looking for a replacement, so I had a steady string of one-night stands. From what I understood, Linda had dated a few times with her old company, but when two husbands started trying to date her alone, it led to 3 more divorces. Linda's parents admonished her, "If you're going to act like this, find another place to live." With the low-paying job she had, it was better to give up than to move out. One of the divorces was Dee and Dave's divorce after Dee infected him with gonorrhea. Looking back over the past year, my biggest regret that night is that I didn't act sooner. I should have just taken her hand and told him no. I should have pushed Dee and Jane's hands away and led her off the dance floor. I should have gone looking for her that night, set his house on fire, and burned it down. But I got the satisfaction of finally ruining that asshole's life. I think about Linda all the time, but until she comes to her senses and realizes what she did wrong, we're going to be two ships sailing in different directions. As for next Valentine's Day, I think I'll stay home with the kids and watch Frozen, and now Frozen 2. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.